Hi, welcome back to Highlander Heart, and we are still on our trail finding out information. I've really got to work on these openings about the original movie. It's the 35th anniversary this year, and to celebrate that, we are looking into all the aspects of the movie as much as we can, as much as we can fit into this year to celebrate the 35th. What better place to start than with Gregory Win's original script?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Begin at the beginning.
exactly. Absolutely. And you might think, well, oh yeah, original script. Okay, so what? There were a few little changes along the way, a few notes from producers and things, and that was that. Ew.
No.
Oh, no. No, it was quite different. Um, yeah, really quite different. But before we get to that, firstly, as ever, I want to thank our patrons. You guys are amazing. You
Yes.
really help to make this show what it is and help us to stay professional. So thank you very much for that. If you want to get our episodes early, get extended versions, see stuff that nobody else gets to see, then look us up on Patreon, and just for like a price of a cup of coffee or whatever, you can help us give you all like the best Highlander experience that we can.
That's right. That's how I was able to cut my beard. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. We don't use the fund for things like that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. It's, I mean, yeah, no, it's, yeah.
All into the show. Absolutely.
All into the show. No, it genuinely is, literally. Yeah, what comes in goes straight into, at the moment, our Zoom membership, which gives us a proper premium Zoom that allows us to go beyond 40 minutes without cutting off and looking like idiots in front of guests. So
yes, thank you for that alone.
So let's talk about Gregory Win. So in 1980, now, I mean, that's like a crazy amount of time ago. We're talking like, what, 41 years ago now. Gregory was, I think, 18 or 20. I'm not really sure. But he was traveling with his, I guess, with his parents or with friends. I'm not sure. But he was, I don't know much, clearly, but he was in London. That much I do know. And he was looking around the Tower of London, and inspiration struck. And I love when this happens. I know, Joe, you're a writer as well. And I love it when I'm sort of out somewhere and you just have this kind of click, 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 and all of a sudden,
yeah.
like 5 minutes later, you've got an idea for a story. You're like, wow, where'd that come from? And this was one of those instances. And I love this. It's just such a cool story. So he was kind of, I think he was looking through the armory, he was walking past the armory and looking at all this cool stuff and just kind of thought, oh man, what if you owned all of this? And that kind of transposed into, well, what if you owned all of this and were showing somebody around? And what if you not only owned it, but what if you wore it? What if you could never die? And that slowly, I guess, percolated into a larger story that would come around about a year later. When he signed up to UCLA's, it was, I don't get the exact, it was an advanced graduate course in screenwriting that he joined up at. Paid for by his work as a firefighter at the time, something which would then come to the fore later on when he wrote Backdraft, which is, again, such a great movie. Super amazing movie. So yeah, he was paying his way through college, working as a firefighter. So he was doing that in a day and then sort of going and fighting fires in the night. And part of his whole course was that he had to write a script, and there are some great amazing handwritten notes that he revealed, maybe, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago online, and there's I mean, I love this. It's such a nice little nugget of history, this handwritten opening page from his script. So he wrote this script, which at the time was called Shadow Clan, and he changed the name. eventually, of course, as you do, because Shadow
As
Clan.
we all know, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And Shadow Clan's a little generic. He had a bit of a because at the time he was. I mean, it's another one of those great stories where you find out somebody was kind of like cohabiting with a bunch of other people and also went on to make like great movies. So at the time he was rooming with Ethan Wiley and Fred Decker amongst others. And they were knocking some names backwards and forwards, one of which, and I always love this, and it's so funny because it took me years to understand this joke. One of which was Sword of Bad. And a little side note, this also turned up later on in Ethan and Fred's House movie as a book written by Roger Cobb. But of course, when you say it more quickly, it makes more sense. Sort of bad.
Yes, sort of bad. Yes.
Still tickles me. How's the script? Sort of bad. Oh, really? I'm sorry. No, that's anyway. So yeah, they came up with the name Highlander. He wrote it out as a proper typed up script, whatever, sent it out, and kind of the rest is history, I guess. But his script is very different from what we wound up with. We both reread it again recently.
Yes.
What did you think?
I really, really liked it.
Yep.
It's lean and mean. There's a lot there that we see later, a lot that's expanded on. So it isn't, it is quite a bit different, but the framework is there. I mean, you can see where, okay, this was rewritten to be this, and on down. There's a lot that's not there. A lot of the mythology that has been expanded upon in the later movies and the series, not there. It's very, especially in the descriptions, it's very visceral, very graphic. One of the things that struck me though, reading this, by the time I got to the end of it, I'm like, this is the Highlander script you want to give Chad I can't even pronounce his last name, but Sahelski. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, he's like perfect. Having seen the John Wick movies, he's like perfect to direct that script, because it really speaks to his strengths and kind of the stark violence and everything. But yeah, no, I really, really liked it. There's quite a bit in this script that I wish would have been kept for the movie, that I think would have been really nice. And being a first draft script, and from what it sounds like, one of the first scripts that Greg wrote, it's really structured well. I mean, it's like you literally still could shoot that script and it would be a well-structured, well-paced movie. And yeah, I would like to see that version. There's that kind of trend right now where I think Dark Horse Comics does it a lot, where they do the comic book versions of first draft scripts. And I'm like, whoever has the comic book rights to this should, if they knew about this, should be clamoring to try to get to do a miniseries based on it, because that would be very interesting to see, even in a comics medium. So yeah.
No,
what'd you think?
Yeah, no, I really liked it too. And you're right about the John. I hadn't really thought about it as well. I say that we recently watched John Wick 2 this past weekend. And more than ever, I'm seeing the parallels between John Wick and Highlander.
Yeah.
I think they are very clearly there, and I think that they were. I think I'll be honest. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think that there's a little bit of inspiration from Highlander in there. You've got this sort of reluctant hero. You've got these rules of engagement in secret society, underground society, and all of that. Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely some parallels there. But more so, you're right with this script, because Connor is such a reluctant hero in this. In this one. I mean, he's basically the Connor from Endgame. If you imagine that Connor,
Yeah.
in this one. That's basically who he is. So no, you're right. But yeah, it is. It is relatively concise. I think there's definitely certain bits that feel like they could be trimmed. I think there's maybe a little bit. It's difficult. There's maybe a little bit too much given to the logistics of becoming immortal and how you deal with having to become a new person from an old person. You know, this sort of a lot of discussion with the romantic lead about, well, what we do is we write this over to this, and there's a little bit of fat you could cut out in terms of,
Yeah.
But I like that he thought about the logistics, and I like that he was that there was focus on that, because some of it makes way more sense. And we'll get to it a little bit later when we get to all the differences. But some of it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I enjoyed it as a script. It's much darker. You can definitely see his inspiration from the Duelists in this script.
Yes.
Because he's spoken about that in the past, that this was one of his inspirations in terms of two people down through the decades, basically sort of facing off against each other. Because it is just it's dark, it's gritty. I mean, God, it's brutal, some of it.
Yeah.
But it makes sense why it's brutal. Again, we'll discuss this in a bit when we come to changes. But if you're going to try and kill somebody who's immortal, who potentially is as good as you, if not better, pull a Monty Python's Holy Grail on him, and
Exactly.
It makes it a lot easier to take the head. But yeah, as much as I love the script, what I also like the most are the differences, and I like seeing where it started, because I find it fascinating to see where it started, and to see the lore that was added afterwards is quite interesting, because it's almost incomprehensible to see how different those are, how it started to sort of later on how it became.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah.
No, it's kind of funny you mentioned the Monty Python aspect. Not that there's any humor in this, but
no,
it always it always struck me watching the movies, and especially the series, that if you were, had lived for centuries and you were fighting these other people where they were going to take your head, and you were trying to prevent them from doing that while you were doing the same, you wouldn't necessarily have these big showman like sword fights. You would just there is no flashy sword fights at all in this script. They're very quick.
Yeah.
And it's like, that makes sense. I mean, I understand there's some, we've seen some Immortals that relish the pageantry of it and things like that. But when especially if you're down to the last few, and like you said, up against someone who is your better, you're not going to go, okay, well, ready, go. You're just going to get right to it. So that was kind of, I'm like, that's a main centerpiece of Highlander, is the well choreographed sword fights using different styles and things like that. And there's none of this in this script. It's just they're quick and done.
Very perfunctory. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, changes, there are many differences between this and the original. I honestly, so many, I don't really know where to start, but let's start with the names, perhaps, because it's the most obvious.
They're misspelled.
Well, not though. That's how they started, right? Yeah, but yeah. So we have Connor McLeod, okay, but it's slight changes, one N rather than two.
Probably more accurate, but yeah.
You have Ramirez rather than Ramirez.
Yes.
And his previous names are, and he's a one, but he's is it Cedric, I think, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So that's basically the same. We have a Brenna instead of a Brenda.
Yes.
So no, I mean, just very subtle changes that they decided to make, and I think it's fair enough. I think Brenda seems much more like an 80s name to me
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, Brenner just seems a little bit too nice and kind of ethereal, almost Celtic-y kind of feel to it. So maybe that wasn't quite right. But I think the biggest name change is actually, well, there's two. Are their modern day names? Uh,
Yes.
and this, as I said, this kind of goes into quite a bit about their kind of personas, and or in particular Connor's persona and how that came about and things. So gone is Russell Nash, and to begin with, we have Richard Torpin,
Yes.
which yeah, it's it's a name. Wrong with it. I don't want to offend any Richard Torpins out there.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to do
Yeah,
that.
it's fine. It's a name. But the funnest one, but actually I totally agree with this, is there's no Kurgan. He is generally referred to as the Knight.
Yes.
Fine, I'm good with that. But his modern day name, it's in. I mean, again, very 80s. Victor Kruger. I mean, there's, you can understand why you go for something like that. It's another K name in there and all of that code and stuff.
Yeah.
It sounds harsh. It sounds kind of evil. Very much unlike Carl Smith,
Yes.
who you'd probably just have a pint with down the pub.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, Carl Smith in accounting. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but I fully endorse Carl Smith as a name, if for no other reason than there's a point in the script where they're talking about looking, trying to look up people. Is this guy got a jacket? Like, have you heard anything about this guy? So if you're doing all of that and kind of going, anybody Victor Kruger? Oh yeah, I know Victor Kruger. Yeah, like I've heard of him.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure I remember something. We'll get in touch with
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Do you know Carl Smith? Carl.
Yeah.
Probably about 50 Carl Smiths in Washington, which is where this one's at.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm fully on board with Carl Smith.
No, you're right. It makes sense because it's not, John Smith would be too obvious
Yeah,
because it's like, oh, that's obviously someone using an alias. But Carl Smith or, Brad Jones or something like
yeah,
that, it's generic. And like you said, if you look it up, you're going to see a ton of them.
yeah,
Whereas, Richard Taupin, that's fairly specific.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah. It is. So yeah, so I like that, and I like that he kind of had that. I mean, I assume that the reason for giving him Smith as a surname is just because it's very generic, and it just
Yeah.
it works. I like that he's kind of worked that in there.
Yeah. No, that was good. Yeah. The names, it's really funny because you mentioned that you didn't like, or that you felt it could have been trimmed, how much detail they went into, you know, him changing names over the
Yeah,
years and
yeah,
how he changed property. And to me, that always felt like a missing piece in the
mm,
original film because
yeah,
it's like, well, it's just very easy to say that, and it's a throwaway.
mm,
But what actually went into that? How did he choose the names? And by that token, I was kind of sad that pretty much the rest of the movies in the series never really went into that. And I'm like, well, it makes sense. You'd want to change your name every few years. And I like the little pieces that they had when he's still hanging out in the small little town, obviously for anonymity,
mm,
but the small little town that his dad lived in, and the remarks from people of how he looks just exactly like his father, which of course was him.
yeah,
But having some of that, I mean, we had in the final film we had Rachel to kind of be that identifier in that regard, but it would have been nice to have had, hey, aren't you Russell Nash? Are you related to
yeah,
Brad Nash or whatever? You just look just like him and stuff like that, and that kind of catching up with him a little bit. So
absolutely. And
I like those little touches.
yeah, no, me too. And I like that, that is something that they went into in the series. That's, they did do that sometimes with not necessarily looking like but, there was a few times where Duncan kind of,
Yeah.
went to catch up with somebody from his past. And wow, you look just like, you must be
Duncan
lying.
MacLeod that I knew. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, it feels like the name thing throughout the franchise from kind of that point on, really. Especially when you've got the series again, you've got Duncan MacLeod. It's not even bothered changing his name. It's very much, it's just on a par with the swords and the coats. It's kind of just is what it is. Like, don't worry about it. You know, they've been around for hundreds of years. They changed their names. How? Well, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Just move on.
Yeah,
Oh, look at
exactly.
the sword fights. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yes. Oh, look, a quickening. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things where you just have to accept it and move on. But yeah, and it's handled in the actual movie in a very kind of 80s-y kind of sci-fi way with the signatures overlaying and oh look, we've got computer graphics and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's kind of it's all right. It's not too bad. We have another name change. We actually a character name. It's actually a whole character change. In Castigear, is begins his origins begin in Ling Khan, who's an agent immortal. But he's basically that character, right? I mean, he's just effectively they meet up. There's a little bit more, I felt, animosity between them. Like, not animosity, but
Well,
more of a, are you going to take my head right now?
right. Haven't seen each other in a long time. Are you here to fight? And but then they have some boom boom and it's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, they just go off and get pissed, and it's okay. And it's nice actually because there's very little between the scenes that they have in Whedon's original script and the movie that we know now. But as we know from the deleted scenes, there was more Castigear, and there was they did go out drinking. They did end up sitting afterwards, sitting kind of having a kind of chat and kind of sobering up. And there is a scene very much like that in this, where they break into the zoo and they're just kind of like more somber, kind of just talking about stuff. And so that did kind of move forward, but just some of it was lost in the edit for the actual movie. So yeah, I mean, that's it kind of for the names. There are some other smaller things that I noticed that are different. For instance, Connor's drink of choice.
Yes. Yeah, I'm like, you can't, there's only one bar where you can get that. I find that hard to believe. But
yeah. But then, to be fair, it's probably, I mean, if again, I don't want to offend anybody that likes lager and lime. You're more than welcome to it. But I mean, I could be wrong. But I think if anybody, any Scotsman, is going to be behind somebody of their lineage going into a bar and asking for a lager and lime, I don't see it.
Well, so that part I found funny because I'm quite certain you could go into any bar and you can say, yeah, I'll take a lager and a lime, and you'd get it. And then right after you noting, oh, I figured you'd be in the only bar, in Washington or America where you could order that. Khan turns around and orders something I've never heard of before, and they just happen to have it. I'm like,
exactly.
That should that have been kind of the other way around, but okay.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad they ditched the lager and lime for whiskey, as it should be. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So
no quickening in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a biggie.
Which is huge. I mean, they still have the pieces in there about kind of a vague hand wavy thing of the final person will get some kind of awareness or something.
Yeah.
But when they take heads, there's no quickening. There's no mysterious lack of blood and viscera. That's very prevalent in the descriptions.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting that none of that was there, but there was kind of this vague sense of the prize. And I also kind of liked in the Ramirez scenes, kind of the description of there's kind of a vague reference to not all immortals are interested in this. We know that, you know, there's going to be one at the end, but he kind of alluded to the fact that some are just like, yeah, I don't even really want it. And I know they kind of did that in the series some too, but it's like, yeah, we don't really want to participate in the game. And, you know, some of us like Ramirez recognize that, hey, we need to, you know, train someone that isn't going to be a right bastard if they get the, you know, thing at the end, whatever it is, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's some really interesting stuff in there. And I love this. He didn't even know he was the last one until he kills the knight.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he's like, no, Christ, I think I'm the last one.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, whoa, there's not going to be, yeah,
Yeah.
that end bit was just, I thought, I wish that part had come forward, because not only, like you said, that he didn't know he was the last until then, but you know, because of the knight's reanimated head and headless corpse, and the lines that he said to him, to me, it almost was like, this wasn't something that you wanted to seek. It was a burden.
Yeah.
And it was like too much for someone to handle. And it was almost kind of like, you know, in hindsight, it was almost like, well, at the same time as Ramirez and presumably others training Connor, was the knight actually, you know, subtly training Connor too, because he was like, yeah, I know what this is going to be and I don't want it. So I'm going to make it so this guy can defeat me and take it, and I won't have to be burdened with it.
Yeah.
So,
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. No, absolutely.
yeah.
I think probably looking at it as a whole, the biggest difference is the interpretation of immortality.
Yeah.
His interpretation, and I think some of this leaked into the novelization. I could be wrong, but we will be looking at that at a future date.
Yes. Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. But yeah, the interpretation of immortality, literally the mechanics of it, everything is very different.
Yes.
So let's start at the beginning. This comes from something that Ramirez tells him. So everyone's sort of always known the story of Ramirez is, you know, basically he died by being run over by a car. But it happened as a boy.
Yeah.
So he is run over by a car as a boy, but obviously in I don't know that we necessarily find out how old Ramirez is in Widen script, but obviously we imagine him as being a fair bit older. You also notice when Connor dies that it doesn't actually seem like he dies for the first time. He doesn't die. He just doesn't. Well, he doesn't die. He just gets better.
Yeah.
But he receives mortal wounds. But he just gets better.
Yes.
So it's again, there's always been this sense of immortality being triggered by death, and people talk about it being a violent death, and that's, you know, but none of that. It was just you just don't die. You just get snapped in the chest, you know, hurts a lot, and you lie there bleeding, but you'll eventually get better. So there's two things already. One, you continue to age up until what point? I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But we know that Connor has not really aged, because people talk about him looking the same.
Yes.
He's described as not looking any older than
30.
30. Yeah. So do they age at a slower rate? Maybe, I don't know, but
yeah, that part was not really clear. You're right, but yeah, there was no sense of a first death triggers the immortality. It was just you're immortal. I did like the aspect of, like you said, you don't you did have things that killed you and you would come back from that, but even the things that didn't, it wasn't like, you know, they got stabbed, the bad guy walked away, and then they woke up and they were all healed. It was, you actually had, the wound had to heal as it would normally. It's just that fatal wounds weren't fatal, obviously. And not only so, like when Ramirez stabs him in the heart, it
Mm.
takes 3 days before he recovers from that.
Yeah.
And you have the physical signs of that. They still had scars.
Yeah.
They still had physical signs of the wound. It's just whatever internally was damaged, healed, obviously, and they
Yeah.
went on. So they didn't. Spoilers. Ramirez faces the knight, gets his leg chopped off, and then his head. But that kind of presumes, if your limb got chopped off, that would just heal over and you would be without it, I suppose. I
Yeah.
mean,
I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
so
And this has been a sort of topic of discussion for many
yeah,
years.
yes,
What happens, and we know from the series, I guess one of the guys gets his hand chopped off, and that's it. It doesn't grow back. Deadpool style.
well, but he got killed like the next season. I mean, did he? If he had lived for another few centuries, would his hand
Maybe.
have grown back? Who knows?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
uh,
But yeah, no, maybe. But yeah, no, you're right. And I love that Ramirez scene where he chops his leg off. It's fantastic. Uh, but again, it's just so perfunctory. It's like, look, I need to kill this guy. At that one point, he's using his sword as a crutch.
right. Yeah.
Oh, there you
Yeah, yeah, done. Yeah, it's not like
go.
they
On
don't.
God. Well,
Exactly. They don't have this big dramatic fight as the hut falls down around them and all this stuff. It's just like I'm gonna get this done
yeah,
and quickly as possible.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so no, that's great. And of course, the other big difference again is that Connor is talking about, I think when he's telling Brenner about his past, and he has married 9 women and fathered 38 children.
Yes.
Um, and in fact, there's one scene a flashback scene where he's at a gravestone for one of his children, and there are 2 other of his children who are older than he is then.
Yeah.
And and the mother, they're like, who is this mother? It's just like, oh, this is your father.
Yeah. It's like, whoa. And then, but we
Okay.
never see any more of that. So
No, exactly. So yeah, so again, another bit of lore that was added later on.
yes.
And I guess, do you add the elements of lore that they did to make your life a little bit easier narratively? If you don't have to talk about, if they can't father children, maybe that makes life easier for them in terms of when you're writing a script. You haven't got to worry about kids and things in the past. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I
I
thought
would
that would have
argue that it
been.
adds an element of sadness, more sadness to the character if they
Yeah.
had lost children.
I thought that would have been a nice element to have, because you'll have, if you had like a knight or a Kurgan hunting you, at some point you're going to realize that having children might be a liability. Not that you think of them in that terms, but it's like that leaves someone that in some kind of pressure that somebody can use against me.
Yeah.
Kind of the eternal question of all superheroes in the comic books. Anybody in their family is, can be. That's why they have secret identities, because their family could be used against them and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
uh, but I think that would have been kind of a compelling element. So there would have been not necessarily, well, I can't have children, but I learned long ago that it's too painful to have them because I will outlive them. And they can also be used against me. And that, again, is also too painful, So, instead of I can't have children, I've chosen not to for the last 100 years or whatever.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. That would be a nice touch, actually.
Yeah.
It's a choice not to, rather than something you physically can't do.
Whereas someone like the Kurgan would have as many children as he can to use as fodder, probably. Hey, here's someone that's trying to hurt daddy. Go get him.
Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, just just build his own little army of Kurganites.
But that would be. See, now we're getting way into the what ifs. But what is the actual gene or whatever that is immortal? Is it maybe 1 in 20 kids are born immortal or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's, if you were doing a series or a series of movies, that's a good
Mm.
kind of element to throw in there. The possibility, it turns out in one of the movies, the bad guy he's facing is, his kid from 300 years ago that, became immortal, and then, didn't ask for it, and they had to watch their mother and their family die and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. But,
Yeah. No, it's possible. But again, and there's another aspect to it there, you just reminded me, is that not all immortals are apparently born equal. Um,
right.
Ramirez explains to Connor that there are, he describes it as slices of a pie.
Yes.
And some immortals have larger slices. And Ramirez actually says his slice is average, like normal. But Connor and Kurgan both have larger slices.
Right.
So he's more powerful.
Yes.
Um, and uh, and to a degree, it was quite nice because it really, I think there's often the question of why Ramirez chooses to teach another immortal. Why would you do that? And I think
Right.
it's much more obvious in Widen's draft that it's quite, pretty altruistic. He just kind of he doesn't want evil to succeed, and he feels like his life will be worth more if he can train somebody to stop him.
Yes.
And then maybe his life would have meant something. So
Yeah.
that was quite nice. I like that. That's definitely something that was missing from the movie as it turned out.
Yes. Yeah, that was a nice subtlety that, yeah, it's like I'm not going to be able to beat this guy,
Yeah,
just because of the card I've been dealt in my immortal life, but you actually are pretty much his equal.
mm,
So I'm going to help you and train you and make it so that when the time comes, you can beat this guy. Yeah, no, that seemed to be implied via the quickenings in the first movie, but not really overtly, because even the quickening was kind of talked about differently in the first movie, where it was just this
yeah,
connection to life and everything,
mm,
and not necessarily that it could make you more powerful. But yeah, that was really nice touch. It would have been cool if that was kind of
mm,
brought forward. So
yeah. No, definitely.
yeah.
Another aspect I really liked about the script that I thought worked so much better than what we got was Richard Torpin's relationship with Brenna, as
Yeah.
opposed to Connor and Russell Nash and Brenda in the movie. It's a lot more realistic. I felt that I understood why she was compelled
Yeah.
to pursue Torpin and find out more about him. It was just seemed to be fleshed out more, like her real love of history and her kind of and also the fact that she felt like her job wasn't going anywhere. She was just like this kind of glorified desk jockey,
Yeah.
and the niece of the DA, but I think she just feels like she's, there's more. She was trying to prove herself to herself, I think, more. Um,
Yeah. Brenna seemed like, to me at least, read as a much more three-dimensional and much stronger
yeah,
character than Brenda. I mean, she was like, there was a lot of sexism even in the original script, but she was just kind of like, she was not above. I mean, you felt like some of the characters that were like her colleagues, that she was going to headbutt them at any moment and punch them in the face, and she was not. I mean, even when she has her encounter with the knight, she's tough.
yeah.
She's resourceful and smart. And it seemed like that got watered down quite a bit for Brenda in the movie. I mean, she's still kind of tough, but I mean, she's the typical 80s movie damsel in distress,
Yeah,
got a rescue. And I didn't get that impression. Even when at the end, when the knight has her captured, you still get the sense that she was going to probably kick his ass if he kept pushing, right? So I liked the more fully developed female character,
yeah,
uh, than what we got in Brenda.
yeah.
So
No, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And he gives her a great line when she asks. It's my favorite line in his script. When she asks him what it's like to be immortal, And he says basically fear,
Yeah.
fear of those that would kill you, and fear of those that would love you.
Yeah.
And I think that sums it up so succinctly, like why he's scared to sort of fall in love. And I think more so than, and I don't get me wrong, I love the Heather Connor romantic kind of story, and I love that he's still connected to that all those years on and things like that. But in the movie that we got, I think you feel like the reason he doesn't want to fall in love is because of that.
Yeah.
It's because he loved Heather and he can't bear to experience that again.
Right.
Rather than the fact that he's had, you know, a lifetime of relationships and losses, and all of these things are built up to make him fear falling for somebody again. And again, I think that really helps flesh
Yeah.
out him as a character. Rather, yeah, it just, I think, yeah, that was quite a big one for me.
Yeah, and I kind of got the sense from this, even again, something else I felt was kind of watered down from this script to the final, that Connor very much in this movie, or it's in this movie, this script,
Mm.
was in a place of, I'm just kind of done with this, and I'm waiting around for when this guy, because he knew about, 4 other immortals that had shown up recently, that the knight had, well, he killed, the knight had killed him, but he was just done and had kind of given up. Like, it was obvious he probably hadn't had kids in a while or had any romance or anything like that. And he was done. That was it. And then, at the end, it kind of rekindled, partly because of, revisiting his past in that small town, but also Brenna coming in his life kind of rekindled his, maybe I'm ready to be part of life again, part of society and stuff like that. And I think we got a sense, kind of a sense of that in the movie, especially with Rachel and stuff like that. But it still was, I felt watered down, and I liked how it was really apparent in the script. I mean, again, he has, especially, I would say 2/3 of the way through the script, he has very little dialogue. Uh, when he does, it's like one or two sentences. Everyone else around him, is just chattering at him, and he's still. And they, talks about his blank expressions and things like this. So I thought that would have been another thing, another piece that would have been good to have been made more clear in the movie, and how his relationship with Brenna / Brenda kind of made him go, maybe it is worth this. And after I win this, maybe it's time to be more involved. And I think that especially the winning the prize in this early script was a little bit more, it was less, seemed less like, well, I killed another immortal, and oh, hey, look, I now have this power, like it was in the movie. I mean, it was like a very emotional thing for him, and really devastated him. And he disappears for a while. You get the sense he disappears for a while, and then shows back up with Brenna, and he's like, hey, here's what I've got, and here's what's going on, kind of thing. So
yeah, exactly. There was very little, I mean, apart from that very first moment after he kills the knight, where he's in agony because he's feeling, he can feel stuff, he can feel her blood rushing, he can feel stuff, but it's again very vague. But there's certainly no talk of fixing the world and things like that. I think it's insinuated by Ramirez that that I guess maybe the power is knowledge, and you can accumulate all of that, then that's that's something you can use for good. But it's very vague. But it just literally seems to him like mortality is what he wins, which again that carries through.
Right.
Although he does bizarrely say that he doesn't know, he could die tomorrow, he could die in 10,000 tomorrow. It's like, well, you're not really mortal then, are you?
yeah, really. It's like, so you're not sure is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. But that life, but I like that the living is defined by the fact that that you're going to die, and so that's something that he understood and understands now. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, fair few differences.
Yeah.
But some good and some not so good, it's kind
Yeah.
of.
I mean, again, it was, to me, it was so well written that with maybe one or two, pieces trimmed here and there,
Mm,
I think that would have made a terrific movie. Especially if the intention was to do a one and done and just have a singular movie. I think that would have been great. It probably, I don't think it would have taken off and been as popular, possibly because a lot of the romance is
yeah,
gone, a
yeah, yeah,
lot of humor is gone,
yeah.
a lot of the fantastical elements, the quickening and all that kind of stuff. It would have been like, oh yeah, here's another action movie, just happens to be Immortals.
Mm,
um, that was, oh yeah, I remember that movie, that was really good, I think I'll watch that again. I think that's what it would have become. I don't think we would have gotten
mm,
the franchise that's still continuing today,
yeah.
that we got from it. So
No, you're right. And I think certainly in terms of, I mean, I imagine the more fantasy elements like the quickenings and things like that must have been there in the script before it went to Russell Markay. Because I think it had he received a script that didn't have those elements in it, that didn't have the opportunity for him to express himself creatively and visually in the way that he had done to that point, and does generally. I don't know that that would have been the right script for him. So you
yeah,
imagine a script, if it was more like Whedon's original draft, would have had a completely different director, and would have just, yeah, I don't, without those kind of, without that visual flourish, without the effects and the yeah, the fantasy element, I suppose, more. Without all of that, I don't think it would have flourished as a franchise.
no.
I say flourished, but I don't think it would have
Well,
gone on to do what it has done,
yeah,
to this point. I don't think it would have had the longevity. No, I think it would have felt, yeah, because of its darkness. I think it would have been a very good movie. But yeah, you're right. I don't think it would have provoked a franchise. So in the script that we read, that you can find online if you look for it, it generally says there can be but one.
yes, that's the
Um,
line. Yeah.
exactly, that's the line that's in there. And now in Jonathan Melville's fantastic book, A Kind of Magic, available from all good retailers.
Get it now. It's great. It's fantastic.
It is fantastic. The consequent scriptwriters who took Whedon's original and made it what it became, Belwood and Ferguson, they mention how they had evolved "There Can Be But One" into "There Can Be Only One." So that's that's the genesis of that phrase. However,
Except,
except um, when Gregory Widen revealed his handwritten first page of the Highlander script 4 or 5 years ago online, he also revealed a page that included the very important and well-known phrase, handwritten by him, "There can be only one."
yes, yes, and the rest of the script around it is exactly what was written in the final first draft, in the first draft that we read.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Where did it really come from?
yeah, so yeah, I mean, there's the official story and
Mhm.
there's the official credit to where that phrase came from.
Yeah.
But I guess it all ties into the origin of the handwritten script notes. Did they happen before the first draft was typed up? One would assume,
Yeah.
correct? And and if that's the case, then why did he change? Maybe he thought it would be more grammatically correct to say there can be but one.
I mean, and that's the thing again,
But,
which he deserves a lot of credit for in his script. Um, I think he did an awful lot of research historically, certainly with
yeah,
the dialogue and things. that it did feel like it was more of that period. So maybe, yeah, maybe that was a thought that came into a rewrite along the way, where he felt like there can be but one fit the time a little better, and changed it. But yeah, and at some point it just flipped back. I
Yeah.
guess. But
Yeah.
there you go.
So, and it's possible it could be as innocent as, Bellwood and Ferguson were going through all the notes that were available for the script. Probably they've, hand wrote a bunch, and maybe they came across this and in the folder and were like, oh yeah, that sounds better. Let's use that.
Yeah.
And, they could have just thought they wrote it, or,
Mm.
um, who knows,
Well,
but
it's just it. And
you know,
we all, time changes
yes.
things. And over the years you kind of think back, well, what's the idea? Did we were just talking about it, and we just came up, didn't it? And that's how it
You
changed.
just tell the story enough times that,
Exactly.
that's like, oh yeah, that's how it happened. And I mean, as we said, this was back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So it's, by the time they got it, I guess it was closer to 86, but still fairly early. I could honestly not tell you 40 years ago where I got some ideas. I mean, I have things written down for story elements and stuff like that, and I probably couldn't tell you exactly
Yeah.
where those story ideas came from or what the genesis of was.
No,
So
exactly.
I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
but evidence seems to suggest that
It's
that's,
right there.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
right
So
there in, well, say black and white and red.
yeah,
It's right there. So there you go. It all, as far as I'm concerned, that was there from the start.
I'm going to credit Widen. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So. uh,
So there you go. That's it. That's Gregory Win's original script. And from there, great things happened. And as we look on it, sort of in retrospect, I mean, obviously, as we know, the movie didn't do so well when it first opened, but there are lots of reasons behind that. And I must say, generally, if you want to find out more about the story of Highlander, again, I'm going to plug Jonathan's novel, because we don't have any stake in this.
no, other than it's just a fantastic read.
Exactly. Yeah, beyond being Highlander fans and wanting to know absolutely everything that there was to know about Highlander, you will find literally everything. So you'll find the story, all the stories, all the reasons why the film perhaps wasn't as big a release as it could have been, should have been at the beginning, and things like that. And you'll see the changes and why the changes were made to Win's original script. So please, if you haven't already, go and get that book.
Yeah, get it now. It is fantastic. You will not regret spending the money on it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say, kind of as maybe a last footnote on this, I tried not to let it, but I have to say, honestly, reading this first draft script, it is unintentionally kind of altered my perception of the first movie. And it's completely unfair, because I've obviously loved it for years since I first saw it, and thought this is like the pinnacle of, this is how you do a well done movie. This is how you do a movie of this type. But I'm just like, oh, it could have been much stronger if some of the elements, as we discussed, had been carried forward. So I'm struggling with that, because it's only been a couple days really since I've finished reading it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wait for a while for it to settle, then rewatch the first movie and see if my opinion still holds up. I'm sure it will, but it's just like, oh, could have
Yeah.
been.
But you know what? There is still another chance. The reboot.
This is true. I mean,
Yeah, there is still the chance that that we could get a stronger version of the story than we've seen so far. So
yeah, I mean, keep the quickening, keep the romantic elements, but fold those into this original script. Take out some of the paperwork for transferring properties and things like that, and that whole convoluted scheme with Brenna, which was like, okay, that was a bit much. It's like, so are you seducing her so that she can help you keep your house? That's what that's what it kind of seemed. And it was like, that's a little weird, but other than that, fold in the iconic elements of Highlander that are missing from that first draft, but shoot that script mostly. And like I said, this guy is well suited. I mean, it seems like, man, if you're going to write a script for Chad, I'm not going to butcher his last name, to film a reboot of Highlander, this would be the script you want to hand him and go, hey, listen, how'd you like to do this?
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. And it just, as I say, it just folds so nicely into his previous work, the stuff he's already done. Say I'm sitting there watching John Wick, I'm going, this could be Connor McLeod, switch the swords for, the guns for swords.
Yeah. Yes.
Almost there. With just a little bit more kind of background, three-dimensional characters and stuff. Then,
yes.
Fantastic.
All
right. Well, look, thanks, Joe. Thanks for chatting about this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's been fab. And we will continue to go over Highlander and over the coming year and talk about as much as we can and talk to as many people as we can to find out everything we can about Highlander on its 35th anniversary. And our next episode, just as a little FYI, is looking pretty special. So thank you for joining us. It's been fab, and we will catch you next time. Until then, hold fast and don't lose your head.
Is it Widen or Widen? I
vary it. I think Widen. I think I say correctly.
Yeah.
Widen. I think I say Widen. I'm not sure.
Yeah.